We're moving into the mansion with you, Mom. It's too big for one person anyway, and we deserve to enjoy it too. My daughter Jessica said, standing at my door with her husband Derek beside her, both smiling like they'd just announced a generous favor. I stood there in the doorway of my restored Victorian mansion, looking at the two people who, 18 months ago, had convinced me to sign over my modest craftsman home while I was recovering from a minor stroke. The same two people who'd promised they were just helping while I healed, then systematically isolated me from my friends, took control of my bank accounts, and eventually told me I needed to move into a more appropriate senior living facility for my own safety. That was the word Derek had used, appropriate. As if my home of 35 years, the house where I'd raised Jessica after my husband Tom died, where I'd run my small art restoration business from the converted garage, was somehow unsuitable for a 67-year-old woman who'd had one small stroke and recovered fully. For 67 years, I'd been the dutiful daughter, the devoted wife, the sacrificing mother. I'd put my dreams of being a fine artist on hold to raise Jessica. I'd worked unglamorous restoration jobs to pay for her private school, her college, her lavish wedding. I never said no when she needed something. And after Tom died 10 years ago, I'd poured everything into making sure Jessica never felt the financial insecurity I'd felt growing up. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Let me take you back to where this really began. March Moorlumph, Hai Ngin Lea Hai Mui Ba. I was in my kitchen making lunch when I felt a strange tingling in my left hand. The wooden spoon I'd been holding clattered to the floor. I tried to pick it up and couldn't quite grip it properly. My vision went spotty. I managed to call Chinchamuimot. The doctors said I'd had a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. Scary words, but they assured me the damage was minimal. I spent 3 days in the hospital, underwent tests, started medication. The neurologist said my prognosis was excellent. Some people never have another incident, Dr. Patterson told me. With lifestyle modifications and medication, you should be fine. Jessica visited every day, which touched me. She'd been so busy with her new job as a pharmaceutical sales rep that we'd only been seeing each other once a month or so. But suddenly, she was attentive, concerned, asking detailed questions about my care plan. "Mom, you can't live alone anymore," she said on my second day in the hospital. "What if this happens again and no one's there?" The doctor said I should be fine. I protested. It was minor. Should be isn't the same as will be. She exchanged a look with Derek, who'd come with her. "We've been talking. We think you should come stay with us for a while. Just until we're sure you're stable." I should have recognized the manipulation. I should have seen how Derek did all the talking to my doctors, how Jessica started using phrases like diminished capacity and safety concerns. But I was scared. I was alone. And they were my family. I agreed to stay with them temporarily. That's when things started to change. Within a week, Derek suggested I add Jessica to my bank accounts just in case of emergency. Within 2 weeks, they'd convinced me that managing my small art restoration business was too stressful and I should close it. Within a month, they'd arranged for me to sign a power of attorney, temporarily. "Mom, just so we can handle things, if you have another episode." I didn't have another episode, but they'd already started making decisions. My friends called. "We haven't seen you in weeks, Margaret. Are you okay?" Jessica would answer my phone. "Mom's resting. She's not up for visitors. The stress isn't good for her recovery." I tried to protest. "I feel fine, Jessica. I'd love to see Caroline and Ruth." The doctor said to avoid stress, she'd reply firmly, "Your friends are lovely, but they're so demanding, always wanting you to go out, to do things. You need to focus on your health." It was gaslighting, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Every attempt I made to reclaim independence was reframed as risky, irresponsible, evidence that I wasn't thinking clearly. Then came the house. 2 months after my stroke, Derek sat me down at their kitchen table. "Margaret, we need to talk about the Craftsman." "What about it?" "It's not safe for you anymore. The stairs, the old electrical system, the neighborhood, and honestly, the property taxes are eating into your savings. You can't afford to keep it. I've managed fine, for 35 years. Before your stroke, Jessica added gently. Things are different now, Mom. You have to face reality. What are you suggesting? Derek slid papers across the table. We've been looking into options. There's a lovely assisted living facility in Bellevue. It's expensive, but if we sell the house, you'll have enough for several years there. Assisted living? I'm 67, not 90. Mom, please don't get upset. Your blood pressure. My blood pressure is fine. But they'd already consulted with a doctor, not Dr. Patterson, but someone Derek knew who'd written a letter suggesting I might benefit from a more supervised environment. They'd already contacted a real estate agent. They'd already chosen the facility. And because I'd signed that power of attorney, because my name was on their bank account, because I was confused and scared and still feeling vulnerable from the stroke, I eventually agreed. I signed the papers to sell my house. I never saw the full sale documents. Derek handled everything, he said. The house sold for $450,000. Though I later discovered it actually sold for $680,000. They pocketed the difference. The assisted living facility was depressing. Small room, shared bathroom, scheduled meals, activities designed for people with advanced dementia. I lasted 2 weeks before I demanded to leave. Mom, you signed a 6-month contract, Jessica said. Then I'll break it. I'm not staying here. After 3 days of me threatening to call an attorney, they relented. But there was a new condition. Fine, Jessica said, her voice tight. But you can't live with us permanently. You need your own place. I'll get an apartment. With what money, Mom? The assisted living already charged you for 2 months. Your savings are mostly gone. The house money is tied up in the facility contract and legal fees. I hadn't seen any accounting. I'd trusted them. What are you saying? We found you a place, Derek said. Small studio apartment. Month-to-month lease. It's all we can afford for you right now. The studio was in a rundown building in Kent, 45 minutes from where I'd lived my entire adult life. 400 square feet. Water stains on the ceiling. A kitchenette that was barely functional. But it was mine, sort of. They'd signed the lease. I was just the occupant. I moved in with 2 suitcases of clothes and a box of photo albums. Everything else from my life. My furniture, Tom's things, Jessica's childhood memories, had been sold or put in storage. When I asked where, Derek said he'd have to check the paperwork. I never saw those belongings again. For 3 months I lived in that studio. I had my social security, moat, bone chum a month, and nothing else. Jessica and Derek had convinced me to close my business, so I had no income. They'd sold my house, but I never saw any of that money. They claimed it was invested for my care. I was isolated, depressed, and increasingly certain I'd been manipulated. But I didn't know how to fight back. I felt powerless. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Thursday in September, forwarded from my old address, heavy cream paper, formal script. The return address was a law firm in Boston, Whitmore, Stedman, Associates. Dear Mrs. Margaret Holloway, it began. We represent the estate of Evelyn Hartford, deceased. It has come to our attention that you are the sole surviving heir of Mrs. Hartford, your maternal grandmother. My grandmother. I hadn't thought about her in decades. She died when I was 12. And my relationship with her had been distant. She'd lived in Boston, a world away from our suburban Seattle life. She'd been an art collector, I vaguely remembered, but the family had considered her eccentric and difficult. I kept reading. Mrs. Hartford's estate has been in probate for several years due to complex international holdings. However, the matter is now resolved. As her heir, you are entitled to the remaining assets of her collection. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to discuss the transfer of 3 paintings currently held in secure storage. 3 paintings. The letter didn't specify their value, but it included a number to call. My hands shook as I dialed. A paralegal answered, then transferred me to Mr. Whitmore himself. Mrs. Holloway, We've been trying to reach you for months. Your old address kept bouncing our correspondence back. I'm sorry. I've moved recently. I didn't explain why. Your letter mentions 3 paintings? Yes, your grandmother was quite the collector. Most of her collection was sold to pay estate taxes, but 3 pieces were specifically bequeathed to you in a codicil to her will. She wanted them to stay in the family. What are they? 2 smaller works by American Impressionists, a Hassam and a Metcalfe, and 1 rather significant piece, a Mary Cassatt oil painting, circa 1939. Mother and child composition. It's quite beautiful. My breath caught. I knew art. I'd worked in art restoration for 20 years. I knew exactly what a Mary Cassatt from 1939 could be worth. Mr. Whitmore, can you give me a rough idea of the value? He paused. Mrs. Holloway, I'm not an appraiser, but the Cassatt alone was recently evaluated at $5 million. The other 2 pieces together might bring another bon chum home. Of course, these are insurance valuations. Actual market value at auction could vary. I sat down on my stained futon. $5 million. Mrs. Holloway? Are you there? I'm here. My voice sounded strange. What do I need to do? We'll need you to sign some documents, provide identification, that sort of thing. Then we can arrange for the paintings to be shipped to a secure facility near you, or we can facilitate a sale if you'd prefer. There's also a small amount of cash from the estate, about hung after legal fees and storage costs. We can wire that immediately once paperwork is complete. Please do, I said. Wire the cash, and I'll sign whatever you need. Excellent. I'll have my assistant email you the forms today. And Mrs. Holloway? Congratulations. Your grandmother would be pleased to know her collection is going to someone in the family. After we hung up, I sat very still in that dim studio apartment. Outside, I could hear cars passing, someone shouting in the parking lot. Inside, everything had changed. I didn't tell Jessica. I didn't tell Derek. Instead, I called a locksmith and had my door lock changed. Then I called a lawyer, not one of Derek's contacts, but someone I found through the Washington State Bar Association's referral service. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she specialized in elder law. Tell me everything, she said when I walked into her office 3 days later. I did. The stroke, the power of attorney, the house sale, the financial control, the isolation, all of it. Sarah listened, taking notes. When I finished, she looked up. Margaret, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. When you signed that power of attorney, did you understand what you were signing? I thought it was temporary, just in case I had another stroke. Did anyone explain that it gave your daughter complete control over all your financial decisions? No. And your house, did you want to sell it? No. They convinced me I had to. She nodded slowly. Margaret, what they did may constitute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. It's a form of elder abuse. The words hit me like cold water. Elder abuse. I was a victim of elder abuse. By my own daughter. Can I get my money back? From the house sale? Possibly. We'd need to document everything, show that they misrepresented the sale price to you, that they used undue influence while you were recovering from a medical event. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. But yes, I think we have a case. How long? 6 months minimum. Maybe longer if they fight it. I thought about the letter from Boston, about the paintings I hadn't mentioned yet. What if I don't need that money anymore? Sarah raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I told her about the inheritance. Her expression changed, not quite a smile, but something close. Margaret, that changes things. You're not helpless anymore. You have options. What kind of options? Well, first, we revoke that power of attorney immediately. Second, we get you out of that studio and into safe housing. Third, we decide what you want to do about your daughter. What can I do? Legally? Several things. We could file a complaint with Adult Protective Services. We could pursue civil action for the money they took. We could even potentially press criminal charges, though that's harder to prove and emotionally difficult. Or you could walk away. Take your inheritance, build a new life, and cut contact. No legal battle, no confrontation, just done. I sat with that. Part of me wanted justice, wanted them to face consequences, but another part of me, the part that had been beaten down over these months, just wanted peace. I need time to think, I said finally. Take all the time you need, but in the meantime, let's get you stable. Do you have a safe place to stay? I thought of the studio, of Jessica having a key, of feeling trapped there. Not really. Sarah made a call. Within 2 hours, I was in a clean, furnished short-term rental in Kirkland. Nothing fancy, but safe. Private, mine. The Bonmui, home from grandmother's estate, arrived in my new bank account, one that only I controlled 3 days later. I sat on the bed in my rental and cried for an hour. Not sad tears, relieved tears, angry tears. Tears for the months I'd lost, for the mother I'd been who'd raised Jessica to be better than this, for the naive woman who'd trusted too easily. When I finished crying, I opened my laptop and started planning. First, I researched. I spent days reading about Mary Cassatt, about the art market, about auction houses and private sales. I contacted Sotheby's and Christie's. I read everything I could about financial planning, about trust structures, about protecting assets. Then I called Mr. Whitmore back. I'd like to see the paintings before I make any decisions, I said. Of course. When would you like to visit Boston? Would it be possible to have them brought here? I'll pay for the secure transport. Certainly. We can arrange that. 2 weeks later, I stood in a climate-controlled viewing room at a Seattle fine art storage facility, looking at my grandmother's paintings for the first time. The Hassam and Metcalf were beautiful, luminous landscapes full of light, but the Cassatt took my breath away. It showed a mother and daughter, the mother in a yellow dress, the daughter in white. They sat together in a garden, the mother's hand on the daughter's shoulder. The intimacy of the pose, the tender way the mother looked at her child, the trust in the daughter's face as she leaned into her mother's embrace. It was everything I'd wanted with Jessica, everything I'd lost. I stood there for a long time, looking at that painting. Then I called the auction house. The sale took place in March, almost exactly 1 year after my stroke. I didn't attend the auction. I watched via private video feed from a hotel room in Manhattan, where I'd flown to handle the paperwork. The Cassatt sold for $50 million, well above the estimate. The other 2 paintings brought in $9.5 million combined. After auction fees, insurance, legal costs, and taxes, I netted $50 million. I sat in that hotel room, staring at the confirmation, and realized I had choices again. I could leave Seattle, start over somewhere warm, somewhere anonymous, buy a condo on a beach, and never think about Jessica again. Or I could do something different. I thought about that Cassatt painting, about the mother's protective hand, about trust and love, and how they're supposed to flow between generations. I thought about the woman I'd been before the stroke, independent, creative, skilled. I'd given up my dreams to raise Jessica, but I'd never stopped being an artist at heart. And I thought about Sarah Chen's words, "You have options." I called a realtor. "I'm looking for a property, historic home, needs restoration, something with character and potential. Budget up to $50 million. She showed me 7 houses. The last one was a Victorian mansion in Capitol Hill, built in Motnyin Chin Chum Leh Hai. It had been divided into apartments in the Motnyin Chin Chum Sao Muis, left to deteriorate for decades. The interior was a disaster: water damage, outdated wiring, plaster falling off the walls. But the bones were magnificent. 10-foot ceilings, original hardwood under terrible carpet, a grand staircase that just needed refinishing, and the huge windows that flooded every room with natural light. Most people see a teardown, the realtor said apologetically, but I thought maybe, with your background in restoration, I'll take it, I said. She blinked. You haven't seen the second floor yet. I don't need to. It's perfect. I paid Jincham Tamui home cash. Then I hired contractors, good ones, not the cheapest. I hired an architect to help restore it to period accuracy while modernizing the systems. I hired a designer who specialized in historic homes. And I did a lot of the work myself, not the electrical or plumbing, but the finish work. I stripped wallpaper and refinished floors. I learned to repair plaster. I painted and stained and sanded. It was therapy. Every stroke of the brush felt like I was painting over the past year, creating something beautiful from ruin. The renovation took 9 months. During that time, I lived in the partially finished third floor, surrounded by construction dust and the smell of fresh paint. I was happier than I'd been in years. I also started a new business. Not art restoration this time, but something different. I'd learned so much about elder law and financial exploitation through my own experience. I partnered with Sarah Chen to create a consulting service for seniors who'd been taken advantage of by family members. We helped them understand their legal rights, connected them with resources, and guided them through the process of reclaiming their independence. It wasn't about the money. I didn't need money anymore. It was about using my experience to help others. About turning victimhood into advocacy. The mansion was finished in November. It was featured in Seattle Magazine's holiday issue, Victorian Masterpiece Restored to Former Glory. The photos showed the grand parlor with its restored fireplace, the library with floor-to-ceiling built-in shelves, the master bedroom with its period wallpaper and modern luxury bath. Jessica saw the article. That's how she found out. I hadn't spoken to her in 18 months. I'd blocked her number, ignored her emails. Sarah had sent one official letter informing Jessica and Derek that I was revoking their power of attorney and that any attempt to contact me would be considered harassment. They'd sent lawyers letters threatening to sue me for elder abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah had responded with our own threat. We had documentation of everything they'd done. If they pursued legal action, we'd countersue and contact Adult Protective Services. They'd backed off. But the magazine article changed things. 3 days after it published, my doorbell rang. I was in the kitchen, making coffee. Through the security camera I'd installed, I wasn't taking chances. I could see Jessica and Derek standing on my front porch. Jessica looked thinner. Derek looked uncomfortable. Both looked shocked as they took in the mansion's exterior. I considered not answering, but I thought of that Cassatt painting, of the mother and daughter in their garden moment of trust. I opened the door. "Mom," Jessica said, and her voice was different, smaller. "We saw the article. We didn't know you'd bought a place. It's incredible." I said nothing. "Can we come in?" Derek asked. "Why?" They exchanged a glance. Jessica took a breath. "We heard you bought this place, and we thought, we've been thinking about everything that happened, and we realize we made some mistakes. We want to make peace. And honestly, this house is so big, and we've been having some financial difficulties, and we thought maybe we could help each other out. We could move in, help you maintain the place, and—" "Stop," I said. Jessica fell silent. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the entitlement in the way she stood, the presumption that she could just walk back into my life because she'd heard I had money again. "Let me make sure I understand," I said quietly. "You want to move into my home, the home I bought after you stole my house, isolated me from my friends, tried to warehouse me in a facility I didn't need, and abandoned me in a run-down studio apartment." "We didn't steal," Derek started. "You sold my house for Saucham Tam Mui home and told me it sold for Boncham Hai Mui Lum home. That's theft. And fraud." His face paled. "Mom, we were trying to protect you," Jessica said. "After your stroke, we were worried. I had a minor TIA. I was fully recovered within weeks. Every doctor said so. You used my temporary vulnerability to take control of my entire life. We made some mistakes," she admitted. "But we're family. We can work through this." Why now, Jessica? Why not 6 months ago? Why not when I was living in that awful studio? She couldn't meet my eyes. It's because you saw the article, I continued. You saw that I'm not broke anymore. You saw an opportunity. That's not fair, Derek protested. Isn't it? When I had nothing, I didn't hear from you once. Now that I have something, suddenly you want to make peace and move in. They stood there, and I could see them recalculating. This wasn't going as they'd planned. Look, Jessica said finally, her tone hardening. You're 67 years old. You live in this huge house alone. What if something happens? What if you have another stroke? You need family around. I have friends around. I have a security system. I have a medical alert system. I have my lawyer on speed dial. What I don't need is you. Mom. Please. No. I kept my voice steady. You made your choices. You chose to manipulate me when I was vulnerable. You chose to steal from me. You chose to isolate me and try to control me. Those were your choices. So that's it? Derek said angrily. You're just going to cut us out? After everything Jessica did for you growing up? Everything I did? I almost laughed. I raised her alone after her father died. I worked 2 jobs to send her to private school. I paid for her college, her wedding, her first car. I gave her everything. And the first time I needed help, truly needed it, she saw an opportunity to exploit me. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. I'm your daughter. Yes, I said quietly. And that's what makes this so heartbreaking. We stood there in the doorway, me inside my beautiful home, them on the porch looking in. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to leave. You're not moving in. You're not getting any money from me. You're not using me anymore. But, however, I held up a hand. I'm not vindictive. I'm not going to press charges for what you did, though my lawyer thinks we have a strong case. I'm not going to sue you for the money you stole, though I could. I'm going to let you walk away and rebuild your own lives. That's generous, Derek said sarcastically. No, it's boundaries. There's a difference. I started to close the door, then paused. Jessica, if you ever, and I mean ever, genuinely want to repair our relationship, here's what it will take. First, you'll need to be in therapy for at least a year. Not couples therapy with Derek, but individual therapy to understand why you thought it was acceptable to exploit your own mother. Second, you'll need to make a full accounting of every penny you took from me and return it with interest. Not because I need the money, but because that's called accountability. Third, you'll need to volunteer with an elder abuse organization for at least 6 months so you can see firsthand the damage people like you do to vulnerable seniors. Her mouth opened. Those are my terms, I continued. If you do all 3 of those things, then maybe we can have coffee and talk. Not about money, not about moving in. Just about whether there's anything left of the relationship you destroyed. That's ridiculous, Derek said. You can't seriously expect. I don't expect anything, I said. I'm just telling you what it would take for me to even consider letting you back into my life. The choice is yours. And if we don't, Jessica asked quietly, then we're done. I'll live my life, you'll live yours, and we'll be strangers who happen to share DNA. I could see her weighing it. The calculation in her eyes. What would benefit her most? The effort of actually making amends, or the freedom to move on and try to manipulate someone else? I'll think about it, she finally said. You do that. Goodbye, Jessica. I closed the door. Through the security camera, I watched them walk back to their car. I watched them sit there for several minutes, arguing. Then they drove away. I stood in my foyer, in my beautiful restored home, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Not the fake peace they'd offered, which was really just opportunism in disguise. Real peace. The kind that comes from setting boundaries and meaning them. From knowing your worth and refusing to accept less. I walked into my library, where I'd hung 2 pieces from my grandmother's collection, not the cassette, which I'd sold, but 2 small watercolors she'd owned that the estate had let me keep. They weren't valuable. but they were lovely. Delicate florals, full of light. I thought about my grandmother, who'd been called eccentric and difficult. Who'd lived alone, collected art, made her own choices, who'd left me a gift that gave me back my independence. Maybe she'd known what I'd need, maybe she'd been exactly where I was once. I picked up my phone and called Sarah. She came, I said. And I gave her the terms. How did she react? About like we expected. Calculated whether it was worth her effort. Do you think she'll do it? I thought about that. About the girl Jessica had been versus the woman she'd become. About whether people really changed or just adapted their strategies. I don't know, I said honestly, but that's not my problem anymore. I did what I needed to do. The rest is up to her. How do you feel? Lighter, I said. And it was true. The weight I'd been carrying, the guilt, the obligation, the hope that I could fix things, was gone. I feel free. After we hung up, I made myself tea and sat in the window seat in my library, looking out at the city lights. This house, this life, this independence, it was all mine. I'd built it from the ruins of what Jessica and Derek had taken. But more than that, I'd rebuilt myself. The woman who'd been too scared to fight back, who'd accepted their manipulation because she didn't believe she deserved better, that woman was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who knew her worth. Someone who wouldn't settle for conditional love from people who only valued her when she had something to offer. My phone buzzed. A text from Caroline, one of the friends I'd reconnected with after I'd escaped the studio apartment. Art walk tomorrow? Ruth and I are going. Would love to have you join us. I smiled and texted back. Count me in. That's what I had now. A life of my own, choosing. Friends who valued me for me, not for what I could give them. Work that mattered. A home that reflected who I was, not who someone else needed me to be. And if Jessica ever did the work, truly did it, maybe someday we'd rebuild something, but it would be on my terms, based on mutual respect and genuine change, not on her need for housing or money or whatever she thought I owed her. 3 months later, I hosted an open house, not a family gathering, a fundraiser for the elder law advocacy organization Sarah and I had founded. The mansion was full of people, the kind of people who appreciated what we'd built here. Seniors who'd survived financial exploitation. Lawyers who specialized in elder law. Social workers. Advocates. I stood in the parlor, watching people admire the restoration work, and thought about how far I'd come, from that studio apartment to this. From victimhood to advocacy. From despair to purpose. Caroline came up beside me. You've built something remarkable here, Margaret. We have, I corrected, all of us. Have you heard from Jessica? I shook my head. It had been 3 months. No therapy, no accountability, no volunteering. Just silence. I'm sorry, Caroline said. I'm not, I replied, and realized it was true. She made her choice, I made mine, and I'm at peace with that. Because that's what real peace is. Not acceptance of mistreatment. Not settling for crumbs of affection from people who don't truly care. It's knowing your worth, setting your boundaries, and building a life that reflects your values. When peace comes with conditions, it isn't peace, it's opportunism. Real peace comes from within, from knowing you've done right by yourself, even when the people you love most have done wrong by you. I thought about that Cassatt painting, now hanging in a museum where thousands of people could see it. That mother and daughter, frozen in a moment of perfect trust. Maybe Jessica and I would never have that again. Maybe that painting was meant to teach me what I'd lost, and to help me let go. Or maybe, if she ever does the work, we'll build something new. Not a return to what was, but something different. Something earned, not assumed. Something real. Until then, I have this. My home. My work. My friends. My independence. A life built on my own terms. A second chapter that's entirely mine. And that's enough. More than enough. It's everything. If you've ever felt trapped by family obligation, If you've ever been manipulated by people who claim to love you, if you've ever been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries, I want you to know this. You deserve better. You deserve respect. You deserve a life of your own choosing. It's never too late to reclaim it. I'm 67, and I'm just beginning. Your story doesn't end when someone else writes you off. It begins when you pick up the pen yourself.